Bye, Isaac. In the spirit of Isaac Babel, I'm going to do it in under 7 minutes, and I won't read from the text. The first thing you'll notice about Isaac Babel's style is its powerful compression. In Red Cavalry, Babel's prose is so compact that Hemingway, by comparison, seems almost chatty. Babel was born in 1894 in Odessa. In the years leading up to the revolution, he was a dedicated communist, and during the Russian Civil War, when the Reds fought against the Whites, Babel was a war correspondent covering the Red Cavalry for the Soviet military newspaper. He traveled with General Boudinot's Cossacks. Now, if you don't know what it might have been like for a Russian Jew in 1917 to hang out with Cossacks, try to imagine an African-American reporter publicizing the great triumphs of the Klan in Mississippi in 1917, and then add Civil War to that example to give you an idea of Babel's comfort level. The Cossacks were the good old boys of the Red Army. They were thugs, murderers, plunderers, and on occasion a powerful military force. When they weren't involved in battle, killing a Jew was a pretty common hobby. While Babel reported on their activities, the Red Cavalry was actually operating in the Pale of Settlement, that territory in which Jews were allowed to live. So you could hardly ask for a more dramatic situation, a writer assigned to publicize and glorify a band of marauders who are killing your kinsmen. It was quite an assignment, and Babel found a way to do it. His weapon was brutal irony, as you'll see in the 4-page story, which I think is all in there, called A Letter. The setup of this story could not be more simple. 3 sentences introduce the narrator, who tells us we're going to hear a letter from an illiterate young Cossack to his peasant mother, exactly as that young man dictated it to the scribe. Then we get the letter in which the soldier asks first about his horse, then tells his mother that everything is fine, then asks his mother if she could send a basket of food since he has almost nothing to eat. He tells her about the bravery of his comrades, and then, when he gets around to it, he tells his mother how his brother Semyon killed their father. I should point out that Dad is not a complete innocent. Dad had previously hacked to pieces his son, Fyodor. Think of what the Greeks might have done with this family, how many boring choruses the Kurdyakovs might have inspired. And consider the fun that Shakespeare would have had in 5 acts. Babel gives the Kurdyakovs 4 pages. At the end of the letter, Babel returns to the narrator's voice and ends the story with a brief descriptive paragraph. The young man hands the scribe a photograph. Quote, in it was Timofey Kurdyakov, that's the father, a wide-shouldered police constable in a policeman's cap, his beard neatly combed. He was stiff, with wide cheekbones and sparkling, colorless, vacant eyes. Next to him, in a bamboo chair, sat a tiny peasant woman in a loose blouse, with small, bright, timid features, and against this provincial photographer's pitiful background, with its flowers and doves, towered 2 boys, amazingly big, blunt, broad-faced, goggle-eyed, and frozen as if standing at attention, the Kurdyakov brothers, Fyodor and Semyon. Babel has used the war within the Kurdyakov family to show us in 4 pages the war within the Russian nation. Last night, as I started to think about what I would say in these 7 minutes, it startled me to recall the clarity with which I remembered the first time I read a Babel story. It must have been about 1962 when I was an undergraduate, like many of you. Babel was executed in January 1940, accused of being a spy and a Trotskyite. He wasn't either, by the way. From 1940 until the late 1950s, his work had been suppressed in the Soviet Union and everywhere else. In the late 1950s, his stories began to appear in literary magazines. I know exactly where I was sitting when I read The Story of My Dovecot. Decades later, I can still picture the table at the University of Michigan Library and the gray steel stacks where I was roaming, most likely looking for a certain girl when I found the writer who would be my greatest influence. No surprise, perhaps, that Max Apple would fall in love at first reading. I grew up hearing about Odessa from my mother and grandmother who had lived there during World War I. But if my particular history suggests why I was so taken, how about this? Once, at a literary conference, I was standing around being uncomfortable together with Raymond Carver and Stuart Dybek. An editor came over to ask our opinion about whether there might be a market for a new translation of Babel. My two friends, one a recovered alcoholic from the Pacific Northwest, the other a Polish Catholic from Chicago, within seconds of each other, those two began reciting from memory the opening paragraph of Babel's story, My First Goose, a description of Savitsky, the Cossack commander. Quote, he smelled of perfume and the nauseating coolness of soap. His long legs looked like two girls wedged to their shoulders in riding boots. My 7 minutes go back 50 years. Now it's your turn.